Godfall is a first-of-its-kind looter-slasher game developed by Counterplay Games and published by Gearbox Publishing. It really brings me absolutely no pleasure to say that this isn't a good game. Don't get me wrong though, I definitely had some fun here and there, but overall it's just incredibly hard to recommend. I think the first thing I want to say is that I personally do like most of Godfall's visual presentation. I mean, sure, all the gold can look a bit over the top at times, but there are some really nice looking outside areas and some brilliant lighting effects as well. Character models are highly detailed but are sort of generic in their design, although the menus are easy to understand and quick to navigate, which is, helpful. I think the particle effects and all the visual flair can be a bit overwhelming at times though. Sometimes they look really good and sort of add to the spectacle of the battle, but a lot of the time it's just waves of bright lights that obscure your view and sort of melt your eyes. I do think some of the boss designs are quite interesting, but sadly they are mostly a chore to fight. They're meant to feel grand and epic, but like the rest of the game, they just kind of fall flat. It's a shame, really. Okay, so let's talk about the gameplay and combat. As I played through my 20-ish hours of Godfall, I constantly felt that some elements of the combat were decent, yet others were absolutely infuriating. When everything is working and you're in the zone, so to speak, the action can actually feel quite fun and quite engaging as well. Those moments, they're always short-lived, as poor design choices pop up over and over again and it just gets too much. It just feels incredibly clunky for the vast majority of the time. What's worse is that pretty much every action you take in Godfall is locked in when you press the button. The attack and ability animations have to fully complete before you're allowed to do anything else. As an example, if you swing your weapon and see an incoming attack, you can't cancel out of that attack with a block or a dodge. It's sort of ridiculous in an action game. It's got this start, stop all the time feeling, and it frankly becomes annoying after a while. You never get a chance to really fall into the flow of a fight. It's such a shame too, just like most other things in this game, as I did see small glimpses of a sort of fun system that's buried underneath. I think that if the devs put in a bit of work to adjust some of these issues, it would go a long way to helping how Godfall feels to play, and I think that's really important. The feeling of Godfall is just completely off most of the time. The good news is that Counterplay Games seems like they're open to suggestions and constructive criticism, so I guess we'll see in the future. Story-wise, Godfall isn't really up to much. When you first start up the game, you're treated to a short, movie-quality cutscene, which tries to explain why you're here and what you're supposed to be doing. It looks great, but I think it fails entirely in giving you an idea of what's actually going on and why you should care. This, again, is a shame, a running theme here, because the game does have a lot of interesting lore attached to it. You can actually read it all in the menus of the game, but it's exactly the same problem that Destiny has. An absolute wealth of well-written backstory, created by talented storytellers no less, that's buried in menus and not woven into the actual campaign. Please don't make me read through walls of text in a menu. If I wanted to do that, I'd just buy a book, right? This is a video game, so for the love of God, just show me what's going on and let me experience it. The voice acting is serviceable, but the dialogue they're given to work with is just empty and dull. There's really nothing to it. It's like all the writers were just busy on the actual lore that they were putting into the menus and just randomly asked the janitor to come in and, write some lines for them to speak. It's very, very odd. The story that you experience in the campaign, and I use the term story very loosely, is just boring. There's just nothing there. It's all very cookie cutter, very, very dull, and there's just nothing else to say about it. It just isn't there. During that short, roughly 10-hour campaign, you'll be visiting 3 visually distinct worlds. Each of them has story missions, side missions called hunts, and the ability to freely explore each world for as long as you'd like to grind XP and get some loot. To progress through each world, players have to complete missions and obtain sigils of varying elements that will allow you to challenge the area's boss and open the door to the next world. Once you've done this, you'll be doing it twice more in different looking but functionally identical locations. Then it's a final boss and you're done. That's basically it. The gear progression though is actually quite solid, but it's also quite safe. You know, it lacks a certain wow factor that other gear games have, where you're constantly trying to get that next cool bit of loot. The vast majority of the weapons look really cool and have various bonuses that are easy to understand and create builds around. The Valor Plates, which are unlockable suits of armor, don't really have much to distinguish them from one another besides the type of damage they inflict and their sort of ultimate ability known as the Archon ability, but most of them do look pretty cool. Once you found one that you like the look of and started building your loadout around it though, there really isn't any reason to switch to another, as they're all virtually the same except for, as I said, a few minor tweaks. Also, I find it very weird that there's a whole section built into the inventory menu for Valor Plate skins, weapon skins, and skins for other things as well. But the only ones that actually exist are the pre-order and deluxe edition bonuses. There isn't any other way to obtain skins in the game. It's almost as if they had some sort of microtransaction system in mind and then abandoned it when they realized how little content they had, to keep people interested, I suppose. I mean, it's either that or microtransactions are coming. I mean, I really hope not, but I wouldn't rule it out either. There's a decent sized skill tree system that gives some passive buffs as well as unlocking new moves and abilities. I personally use the Soul Shatter mechanic through most of my playthrough. It allows you to attack an enemy with light attacks which highlight a portion of their health bar. You can build this up as much as you like, then you can hit them with a heavy attack and it chops off that entire highlighted damage in one hit. If you manage to kill an enemy with this attack, they'll explode into a shower of teal-coloured particle effects, which, if you have the right skill unlocked, will add Soul Shatter build-up to nearby enemies, allowing you to take them out faster as well. There are other mechanics you can specialise in, such as the polarity system, which involves switching weapons, but none of them are really anything special. They do feel pretty cool to use though, and I'd like to see them expanded upon. The sound design is probably the best part, honestly, but I guess that's not really saying much at this point. The music is fine enough and definitely invokes the high fantasy theme of the game, but it isn't really anything special or notable. The in-game sounds that play during battle are very chunky, very meaty, and can sound a bit like multiple grenades have gone off in a hardware store. When you parry an attack with your shield, for example, you get a nice metal clunk, and it feels really satisfying when it's pulled off correctly. I also tried out the 3D Pulse audio system that the PlayStation 5 has, and it really does sound incredible. I usually use a decent soundbar, but having the headphones on and the sort of 3D nature of the sound that's produced is really quite immersive. It really helps you understand where the enemies are, and you can actually just stand there and listen to the ambient noise of the world, which is quite nice, but again, it doesn't really help the game. It doesn't really elevate the game, is what I'm trying to say. Unfortunately, the end game is virtually non-existent and simply recycles everything from the main campaign, which wasn't very long to begin with some minor modifiers and tweaks. The only goal after completing the tiny campaign would be the level cap of 50, I suppose, and of course getting better and better gear. The problem with that is the only content you can do at level 50 with that shiny new gear is the same content you've already been doing to reach that cap. So it all feels rather pointless after a while. As well as the recycled stuff, you can also do the Tower of Trials, which is basically a roguelike style activity in which you ascend an elevator by defeating enemies, and it gets progressively more difficult as you go up, and you get XP and loot, etc, etc. I haven't really delved too far into any of that, as it's frankly pretty uninteresting and isn't really worth the time investment either. Some people who really enjoy a long grind may find some sort of fun in it, but I would really advise against it at this point. As far as bugs, glitches and performance goes, I only had one crash in roughly 20 hours of play, so all in all not too bad. There were some moments of stuttering when I picked up large amounts of loot at once, but rarely anywhere else, which is fine. I played in performance mode, which runs in a resolution most of the time of 1350p, and it was pretty much locked at 60 frames per second as well, which is nice to see. On YouTube, of course, you'll only be seeing a compressed 1080p 60 FPS video, but I can assure you that when you play this in person, it does look a lot better than what you are currently seeing. Besides the stutters, I didn't really notice any frame drops anywhere else, even when the action was thickest and the screen was burning particle effects into my face. Various other reviewers seem to have had different experiences though, with some reporting 10 or more crashes in about the same amount of time played, and much more stuttering than I had, even when playing, as I say, on the same console. Some people were playing this on PC and reported more issues, but people playing on a PS5 were saying that they had far more issues than I had, so I really have no idea why I had better performance on my PS5 than others did, but it is what it is, I suppose. So then, with all that said, I really don't like to beat a game down too viciously, because I'm sure that the studio and the staff work really hard to get the game to where it's at now. But I suspect that what I'm about to say happened due to choices that were made by higher-ups in the various companies that were involved. My number one issue with Godfall, more than anything else, is its insane price tag. At retail, this title costs $70 US or 70 English pounds, and even more for the deluxe edition. The asking price is so close to an insult, and the fact that they have a paid expansion in the works is just ridiculous in my eyes. If this was the extent of the studio's vision, then surely they should have known this was not going to be a full-priced game. Surely they must have known. I just get the feeling that something happened or a deal was made somewhere and the final product was altered. I mean, you'd have to at least double the content in this game to justify $50 US or 50 English pounds, let alone 70. There just isn't enough stuff to do here, and what is here is fundamentally flawed at a ground level. I think if you could get hold of it for under $30 US, 30 English pounds in a sale, then perhaps it might be worth a single playthrough, perhaps, maybe if you play it with a friend. I really do hate to say it because I desperately wanted to love this game, but it feels somewhere between a tech demo and a budget title, which isn't good for a game priced at 70. It's frankly ridiculous. I did genuinely have a small amount of fun in some instances, but ultimately, more often than not, you don't even get close to what you pay for with Godfall. At this point, my final score for Godfall on the PlayStation 5 is going to be a 4 out of 10. Please keep in mind though that a 4 is below average on my scale, with a 5 being an average game, just something decent. It's not the worst game I've played by a long shot, but it just isn't in a good place at launch. Perhaps in time, after some patches and improvements, it could be an above average game at maybe a 6 out of 10 or even a 7. For now though, I would definitely give this one a miss. Thank you very much to anyone who took the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, please consider leaving a like. If you have something to say, the comment section is open down below, and if you'd like to help support the channel, you can subscribe or head over to my Patreon page. Links for all the important stuff will be in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.